I did that already.
Go ahead. I know.
Are you doing an intro or am I doing it?
No, you can. That's what I was saying over there.
Okay. I don't even know what
Hey guys, we're back.
Yeah, I guess so. Hey, we're back. It's been a while, but we're in a new place. We moved, and we got a bunny. She's back there. You'll see her at the end of the video. Say hi to YouTube. No, pick your head up. What are you doing? Up there. Say hi. Hi, YouTube. I'm Stanley. You look terrified. Why are you acting terrified?
She's not terrified. She actually loves
No, she loves climbing on Daddy.
Yep.
Where are you going?
and she likes to be cuddled. She's a very sweet bunny.
You gonna play Pirate Bunny? Get on Daddy's shoulder? Yes, you are. Okay, there you go. We're gonna watch Mr. Ballin. Don't ever rekindle a romance like this. So, thanks for sticking around, those of you who did. And welcome for all the new people. Well, let's go.
There is a little cottage right on the water in Maryland called Cottage 506.
Maryland?
It's a rustic place with a wood fire
I'm from
stove, a
Maryland.
couple of small beds, and a small sitting area for breakfast. And then outside the cottage on the porch, you have this amazing view of the water. And then behind the cottage is the resort that the cottage is a part of. And the resort offers guests that stay in this cottage great food, great entertainment. I mean, this is a great spot. However, Cottage 506 has a dark secret. And it's the reason I and many other people will never be staying there. But before we
Everywhere in
learn about
Maryland
Cottage
has a
506,
dark secret. It's a
if you're a
slave
fan
state.
of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place because that's all
You
we
still
do.
get that
and
green
we upload
tinge on
once a
here.
week. So,
Yeah.
if that's of interest to you, please offer to house sit for the like button while they're away for the weekend. But instead of looking after their property, just spend the entire weekend downloading viruses to the like button's computer. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss
Got
any of our
4
weekly
channels
uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
Crazy. I remember when he first started. Now he's got 4 channels, a charity. It's like Donut Operator. I remember when he first started. Now he's got a skateboard store.
A little afternoon on Valentine's Day 1998, a married couple named Steve and Kim Rico held hands as they walked towards their car. They had just dropped their 8-year-old daughter off at a neighbor's house in the suburban neighborhood in Maryland where
I
they
was
lived.
like 8 months
And
out
now
of high
Steve
school.
and Kim
9
had
months,
the
something
whole
like that.
weekend to themselves, and they were really excited about
They were
it
about to graduate.
because they had this big trip planned. Now, admittedly, Kim had no idea what they were actually going to be doing because Steve was the one who planned it, and he was obviously being very secretive about the details. He wanted this to be a surprise. And so for weeks leading up to this weekend, Kim would see Steve on the phone all the time, presumably planning whatever it is they were going to be doing, but he wouldn't let Kim hear what he was saying on the phone. He would kind of muffle his voice, or he'd hang up before she could come over and hear
Cheating?
him. And then also after these secretive phone calls, Kim would often see Steve writing all these notes down in his journal, presumably about whatever it was he was planning.
Work or
The only details Steve shared with Kim about this trip was make sure you wear something nice. When the couple reached their car, Steve hopped in the driver's seat
Wear
and
something
Kim
nice.
hopped in the passenger seat, and immediately right after Steve had fired up the car, Kim turned to him and said, "Are you going to tell me? You going to tell me where we're going?" But Steve just grinned and said, "Nope, it's a surprise." Kim gave a theatrical sigh and sat back and feigned
it's a
frustration.
surprise, all right.
But inside, the way she was really feeling was just excited. This was so cool that Steve had put so much effort into whatever it is they were going to do. But also, Kim was seeing her husband was really making a big effort to make her happy. And this was kind of new because lately, their relationship
Maybe there.
had been really rocky. Kim and Steve had been married for 9 years by this point, and they were both very,
look at that
very
hair.
different people. Steve was a total homebody, kind of introverted, and Kim was the opposite. She was super extroverted and very social. But when they first met each other, it was actually their stark differences that brought them together. For Kim, when they met, she was in her early 20s, she had just dropped out of college, and her experience with men so far had been she would meet them at parties or bars, and at first it would seem like their relationship was great, but then invariably these guys would just kind of move on and break Kim's heart. But Steve was different. He was this huge guy, 6'4", massive football player, but he was totally a gentle giant.
I need
And
the
as soon as he
fingernail
met Kim could tell this guy is different. He's treating her with respect, he's loyal to her, he really cares about her, and so they hit it off right away. And Kim very quickly became pregnant, at which point Steve asked her to marry him, and Kim didn't hesitate for a second. They were totally in love. And marriage to Steve had really been a stabilizing factor in Kim's life. She wound up going back to college and got her degree, which landed her a job as a surgical technician, which is what she did now.
Oh,
and
wow.
Steve turned out to be just a fantastic father, and he wound up actually staying home with their daughter when she was a baby, so Kim could go
Oh,
out
so he
and
didn't have a
work.
job.
And Kim always thought
No.
it was funny
I mean,
when she would
apparently.
come
He had a
home
job, yes.
and she would see Steve
Staying at home
standing
is
in
a
the
job.
doorway cradling
Yeah.
his
I just meant he
infant.
didn't go
He's like
outside
this
of the house for
massive
his
person,
work.
and so their
Yeah.
baby looked like a toy. But unfortunately, over the last year,
So it wouldn't have been a work
Kim had
call.
seen a change in Steve.
No.
He went from being a shy person, but a person who could go out and function in society, to a shy person who basically stopped going outside altogether. Steve basically refused to go out anywhere with Kim. He didn't want to talk to anyone. He didn't want to spend time with their friends or family. He just wanted to stay home and watch TV or hang out in the basement. I mean, it was pretty obvious he was depressed, but his introvertedness was becoming kind of stifling for Kim. And so Kim approached Steve and said, "You really need to go to therapy to get better here. You know, I'll go with you. We can do couples therapy." But Steve refused. And so finally, right around this past New Year, Kim decided she had just had enough. She was totally unhappy. She did not feel like Steve was going to change. And so Kim told Steve that she wanted to get divorced. And when Steve heard that, he realized the gravity of this situation. He knew Kim was unhappy with him, but he did not know she was thinking about separating. And so Steve kind of broke down and begged Kim to give him
Usually
another
by the
chance.
time
You know,
they
let
say
him prove
they want a
to her
divorce,
that he
they've
will
already
change,
checked
that
out,
he
bro.
wants this marriage to work. And Kim said, okay. And so that was how Steve wound up planning this very secret getaway on Valentine's Day. This trip
Gotcha.
was supposed to
Okay.
be the start of their new and improved marriage, and so Kim was really excited and optimistic.
The grand
about
gesture
future.
to save the
After
marriage.
driving for about an hour and a half, Steve pulled off the highway and
Learning how
began
to play
following
hockey.
signs towards the Eastern
Yeah.
Shore, which is a waterfront
Hey,
area
Eastern
of
Shore.
Maryland that's
I used to
very
go there all the
beautiful,
time.
that was located
Great
about
crabs.
70 miles away from Steve and Kim's home. After driving for a few minutes, Steve pulled into the parking lot of the Harbortown
Harbortown.
Golf Resort. And as soon as he pulled into a spot and turned off the car, he clapped his hands and turned to Kim and said, "Okay, we're here." And Kim looked from her husband out to all the perfectly manicured grounds and the beautiful resort, and she smiled and leapt out of the car excitedly. Kim and Steve took each other's hands and marched inside to check in, and as they were checking in, the person behind the desk gave them glasses of champagne, and then after handing Kim and Steve their key cards, the receptionist told them that their cottage where they were staying was like the nicest property at the resort. Kim and Steve were totally pumped. They took their champagne and their room keys, they walked back to their car, and then drove a little ways deeper into the resort to their cottage. It was cottage 506, and it looked out over the water. And when they went inside, Kim was totally wowed. It was this rustic suite with a wood fire stove in the middle and two queen-size beds
That's not
and a little
very
coffee
nice.
table area for breakfast over here.
What year was it?
It was perfect.
98.
And then
Yeah.
when
I
Kim
guess
actually
the
walked
bedding-
into this
Those
cottage,
bedspreads are like-
she noticed there was a card sitting
Yeah.
on the table. And it
That's
looked
also
like
the
a
Eastern
wedding
Shore of
invitation.
Maryland.
Kim was confused and looked over at Steve, and Steve just smiled and said,
What does
"Go,
that
check
have
it
to
out."
do with
And so
anything? You
Kim
can have
walked
nice
over and she
resorts with
grabbed the
nice
note,
bedding.
and she began reading it.
Well, the
and as
Eastern
she did,
Shore
she
is
began to
kinda
smile. The card really was a
like
wedding invitation,
back in time
albeit it was for a
type of
fake
thing.
wedding. Because it would turn out
They're
this
a
was
little
not
behind
just
the
a
rest of
random
I understand,
overnight
but I'm
Maryland
saying
Steve
they
had
could
planned for
also
both of them. Instead,
have an
he had
old
purchased
look,
a
but still
romantic
comfortable
getaway
and
package,
nice.
which
Yeah.
included this amazing cottage, but also a professional dinner theater performance that would be held on
I
the
just mean a
resort
lot of stuff on the
grounds.
Eastern Shore
Kim
is
read
like
the
dated.
description of the dinner theater show on this invitation.
'Cause a lot of it's
it was a
family
murder
owned,
mystery called The
like
Bride
that old
Who
Blue
Cried,
Blood,
where the actors
Maryland
in the
Family
show
Money.
would put on a whole fake wedding, and then at the end of the wedding, somebody would get killed, and the audience
think
would
it'll be like
figure
that
out who
anymore,
did it.
but maybe.
For an
Well,
extrovert
maybe not
like
anymore,
Kim,
but-
an activity
when's the
like
last
this
time you
was
were there?
perfect, and so Kim felt totally touched that clearly Steve heard her, and the first thing he did to kind of win her back
15,
was to
16,
begin to do
something
the
like that.
things that Kim really wanted to do, which was really going out and having fun. And so after Kim finished reading the card, she turned and looked over at Steve, and Steve was kind of nervous because he wasn't
The
sure
Shore?
if Kim was going to like
Yeah.
it. And Kim,
Eastern
she
Shore,
broke into this
2015 or
huge smile.
16,
She
something like
walked
that.
over to Steve and gave him a big hug. And Steve, he was so happy.
I didn't stay at a
he hugged
resort
her
or
real
anything,
tight
but
right back. Kim and Steve would spend the next couple of hours sitting by their fire inside of their nice cottage.
Went for crabs.
Drinking their champagne and talking about the future and just telling stories and having a good time. And then around 7 p.m., Steve and Kim put on their nicest clothes and walked their way over to the area
Dinner
on the
theater.
resort where this dinner theater was going to happen. It was in an event hall with a bunch of round tables set up for the audience. And so once Steve and Kim and the other audience members all took their seats, the actors and actresses came into the room, and they were all dressed in their wedding clothes. There was a bride and a groom and a wedding party, and the audience was instructed to participate in the wedding as if they were wedding guests. And so the audience all stood up, and they began kind of having this fake social hour of meeting all the wedding guests. And then Steve, Kim, and the audience members all took their seats, and they got ready to watch the drama unfold. And Kim, pretty much immediately, was totally absorbed in this performance. She was so enthusiastic, talking to the actors and talking to the other guests, and really pretending like she was part of the wedding. I mean, she was having a blast. The play itself was about a groom who was in the mafia, who was forcing his bride to marry him by threatening her family. The climax came when the groom stood up and gave a toast with his champagne. He took a sip and then fell down dead. Kim watched all of this with delight, but she kept looking over at Steve, hoping he too would be smiling and having a
Life
good
imitates
time.
art.
But each time she looked at him, he was just kind of stone-faced and looking straight ahead, like he just didn't care or he was totally disinterested. And then a couple of times when Kim leaned over and said, "Hey, honey, who do you think did it? Who do you think the killer is?" Steve basically just completely ignored her. It was like she wasn't there and the play wasn't there. He was just totally zoned out.
Why don't
Eventually,
you go
Kim
take
and
her
a
then?
few other very enthusiastic audience members figured
would you
out
take
the
her on
killer
a
in the
trip
play was the
as a
bride's
last-ditch
mother,
effort,
who poisoned the
supposedly,
groom,
and
and then
not even
after
pay
this
attention to
discovery
her?
was made, the play was over.
That makes no
As
sense.
everyone got
No.
up from their
Well,
seats and
unless
began
you plan to
leave,
kill her
Kim couldn't help but feel
on the
really
trip,
annoyed with Steve.
and that was the only
because he was
reason.
just so silent and not invested in this play.
Yeah,
and it's like, we
maybe.
came all the way here. Why aren't you at least
Yeah,
pretending
why
to enjoy
come
this?
all the way here?
But Kim also thought, Steve put a ton of effort into this weekend. He's clearly trying. I'm not going to start a fight. I'm not going to bring it up. And so finally, Kim
Yeah,
just said
but
to
you're
Steve, hey,
No.
why don't we go to the bar and get a couple of drinks?
Let's
bring
go
them back
to
our cottage and
the
just
resort
hang out
for the
there
weekend.
night."
I'm not gonna
And
talk
when
to
Steve
you,
heard
but
this,
let's go.
He actually smiled and said, "Okay,
Well,
great, let's
again,
do it."
if
I
he
would not
brought-
be
By the
okay
time
with
the
that if
couple
you
got
did that
back
to me,
the
babe.
front door
I
of
know,
cottage
but if he brought her to kill her,
506,
then
they
there you
were
go.
holding hands again and laughing and telling stories, and they went inside, and Steve put the beers down on the table, and then Kim said she was going to go in the bedroom and just quickly change into something more comfortable. And so Kim walked into the bedroom and shut the door, and Steve walked to the front door and turned the lock.
Ad read. We'll be back.
3 hours later, a man named Philip Parker, who was staying at the resort with his family, heard a commotion in the lobby, and he heard people saying there might be a fire at Cottage 506 and there could be somebody still inside. Philip immediately turned to his cousin who was with him, and the two of them bolted outside and just started running towards Cottage 506. And as soon as they got to a place where they could see the cottage from a distance, they could see black, oily smoke pouring out of the windows. When they got up to the burning
oily's
cottage,
not good.
Philip
I've
ran to
never
the
heard
front
of oily
door, but it
smoke.
was locked. He couldn't get inside. He
have.
screamed
Like
to
a
see if
grease
anybody was
fire
in
or
there, but there was no
chemical
answer.
fire or
And so
something.
Philip and the cousin ran around to the back of the cottage where there was a glass sliding door, and Philip, he tried the handle, but it was locked. At this point, the cousin said he was going to run back to the resort and get a fire extinguisher, and after the cousin ran off, Philip turned back towards the sliding glass door and realized it actually opened on both ends, and he had only checked one side and found that side to be locked, but on the other side, which he was now noticing, it was obviously unlocked because it was open just barely. And so Philip immediately opened it up and all the smoke began coming
Boom.
out, and so Philip dropped down to get a better look because down low the smoke had not fully settled. There was a bit of an air pocket right at the bottom of the floor, and so Philip got down and he looked inside, and for a second he couldn't quite see anything, but then he noticed in the middle of the bedroom, right inside this cottage, he could clearly see somebody's feet. Somebody was on the ground. And so Philip screamed that he was coming in, and then he opened the door the rest of the way and
Grab
he
the
began
feet and pull 'em out.
low-crawling into the bedroom. And as he did, he was hacking and coughing from all the smoke. And so finally Philip reached this person and he grabbed their foot and he shook them to try to wake them up. but they weren't moving. But the fire was getting bigger and stronger. The smoke was getting thicker. Philip was really starting to panic and was worried that he too would get trapped in here. And so he just grabbed this person's leg and began pulling them. And it was really hard, but he finally got this person back to the door. He couldn't quite get them over that lip of where the sliding door was. But right then, Philip's cousin showed up, and the two of them were able to grab this person and get them out of the cottage. And this was the moment when Philip finally got a look at the person he was just dragging out, and it was immediately clear to him that this person was deceased. Their face was basically gone. It was completely burned away. In the days and weeks leading up to this weekend, Steve really was taking secret phone calls and writing notes down in his journal because he was planning something very special. But he was not the only one with plans for this weekend. Here's what police say happened after Kim and Steve got back to their cottage following the show, and Kim went into the bedroom to change, and Steve went to the front door and locked it. A couple of minutes later...
She did it or he did it?
He did it.
You think he did it?
I think he did it.
Okay. He said, but he wasn't the only one making plans, so maybe she did it.
Yeah. I don't know.
Maybe it's like a Laura Stelmasic thing. Oh, he's taking me somewhere, and you gotta come take out the trash.
Yeah, maybe. But he locked the door.
Yeah.
That part doesn't make sense. He locked the door.
All right. We'll see.
Later, Kim came out of the bedroom wearing something sexy, and she looked at Steve and smiled and said, "Come on, get in bed. I'll join you in a second." And so Steve's like, "Great, my plan is working. We're going to reconnect here." He climbed in bed and he laid down, and Kim, she walked over and got something out of her bag, and then she walked back over to the bed and she pulled out a syringe and she stabbed it into Steve before he could do anything, and she injected him with something called succinylcholine. Kim had access to this drug from her job as a surgical tech. Succinylcholine is used to relax people's muscles during surgery, but if you give someone too big a dose, it can stop their breathing. And this drug works pretty much instantly, which means Steve would have seen his wife stab him with that syringe, but then instantly he would have been totally paralyzed, but fully awake and fully alive. And so as he was laying there, he would have seen his wife put the syringe down, and then grabbed lighter fluid, and then walked over to him and calmly poured the lighter fluid all over Steve's face and chest. And then one of Steve's final images he likely saw before his lungs stopped working and he died was his wife striking a match and lighting him on fire. After lighting Steve on fire, Kim casually walked out the backsliding door. She shut it, leaving it open just a crack, and then she made her way to the resort
gotta
lobby,
have that airflow for the fire to breathe.
About how her cottage was on fire, and she thinks her husband was still inside. And Philip overheard Kim say that her husband might be inside the cottage, which is when he and his cousin jumped into action. They ran to the cottage and ultimately found Steve deceased inside of the cottage. Ultimately, Kim never intended to give Steve a second chance in their marriage. She was already having an affair with a much younger man who was in the Marines, and she was just done with Steve. As Steve began telling his friends and family,
once they start talking about divorce, they've already checked out and moved on to somebody else.
Kim was going around
she monkey branched to another dude.
Literally openly talking about how she wanted to murder her husband.
Nobody said anything.
Nobody took her seriously.
Wow.
They thought she was just
they thought she was joking.
kind of dramatic. But as soon as the news broke that Steve had died in this fire and Kim had not, people rushed to the police to tell them.
Joke,
pretty sure
though.
Kim had something
like,
to do with
you should
this.
be able to
Kim
tell.
was convicted of her
kill my
husband's murder,
husband,
and she was sentenced to life in prison. It would turn out the primary reason why Steve was so secretive before going on this trip was he really wanted it to be this unbelievably special, romantic, kind of like recreation of the couple's first date.
Poor sucker.
And so what he was doing is he was calling all of Kim's friends and family members and asking them questions about things Kim liked because he wanted to incorporate all of her interests in this trip. And then after these calls, when Steve was writing in his journal, that was not just writing down like logistics of the trip. He was also writing down how much he loved Kim and how excited he was for their future and what they would build together as a family. I mean, Steve really believed they were on a path to reconciliation. But of course, that just was
it made a heart. Not cool. Yeah, like, warning. There are all you guys out there. When she starts talking about she wants a divorce or she thinks she needs some space or separate or whatever, she already checked out. She's gone. She's with another dude. So, cut ties and move on. Trust me, I know from experience.
Not me.
No, not her. Past experience. But once she starts talking, and we've seen enough true crime,
Yeah.
and we know enough people in real life that once she starts talking about, oh, we should get a separation, or oh, I want a divorce, or whatever, she monkey branched months ago and checked out, and she's on to another relationship. So just let it go and move on, bro.
Well, I think it depends. If you have kids, it might be a little different.
Yeah, but in general, everybody's different, but
Yeah.
in general, yes, she has moved on. Okay, so that was Mr. Ballin talking about some chick setting her husband on fire. Thanks for watching. Oh wait, we have to show you our bunny. We got a bunny. When we moved, we have to show you her. Hang on.
Well, before we moved, we got her.
Yeah, true. Alright, Stanley.
Her name is Stanley, and yes, it's a girl named Stanley because my dad's middle name was Stanley. And we got her not long after my dad died, so we wanted to name her after my dad.
Come on, baby girl. Say hi. Say hi to YouTube. No, pick your head up. What are you doing? Up there. Say hi. Hi, YouTube. I'm Stanley. You look terrified. Why are you acting terrified?
She's not terrified. She actually loves
No,
to
she loves climbing on Daddy.
Yep.
Where are you going?
and she likes to be cuddled. She's a very sweet bunny.
You gonna play Pirate Bunny? Get on Daddy's shoulder? Yes, you are. Okay,
Yep.
there you go. Yeah, so
Just
this
gonna
is
say-
Stanley.
Turn around and show her, because she'll be
Yeah.
looking right at the... Yep.
She loves climbing on Daddy's shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
trying to be a pirate bunny, like she's a parrot.
And she likes bunny pets, too.
And she likes her bunny
Right
pets.
there.
But this is
She's-
Stanley.
She's traveled with us to Arizona. She always goes with us on any overnight trips for the most part.
Yep.
She has a little pet carrier.
Yep, we take
And
her
she's-
everywhere.
Potty trained.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's very, very good potty trained
trained.
bunny.
Yes, she is.
But yeah.
Mwah.
That's our bunny. Sometimes she gets attitude. So if you hear scratching and thumping in the background, that's just Bunny being Bunny. But she will say hi more later. But right now she wants a treat because I pulled her out and she didn't get a treat. So, alright, let's go, Missy.
Bye. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you.
Crazy rabbit.
She just jumped off him. We will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like.
Yep, bye. You crazy bunny, you want a crunchy bear?
You probably
Yes.
got mine, or you probably got it on me too. Maybe. You can check my back.
Alright, there you go.